Hello and welcome to Channels Business Global with me, Simon Pusey, from our studios here in London. As you can see, my colleague Juliana Olayinka is not here with us this week as she has been busy gathering the business news on the sidelines of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Coming up on today's show, during his address to the General Assembly, Nigeria's Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, called for global cooperation on key issues like democracy, climate change, security and UN reform. The Vice President, representing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in New York, has enjoyed the support of a large delegation from the Nigerian government in New York. Juliana has been catching up with them. And away from the high-level debate, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet Leadership Council met at the Rockefeller Foundation to discuss the Mission 300 Challenge, a bold initiative to bring electricity to 300 million people by 2030. Juliana was there, and we will shortly be sharing her interview with Ajay Banga, President of the World Bank. Then later, Africa Missions Global unveiled its ambitious Horizon 2033 initiative, which aims to empower 100 million lives through education by 2033. We will be sharing highlights from their roundtable discussion. But first, in his address to the 79th UN General Assembly, Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima called for urgent global cooperation on critical issues including democracy, climate change, security and UN reform. He highlighted concerns over unconstitutional changes of government in Africa's Sahel region, urging international support for democratic stability. Shettima reiterated Nigeria's commitment to climate goals, pressing developed nations to fulfill their $100 billion pledge for climate damage funds. He also called for self-reliant African security mechanisms and reforms to give Africa permanent representation on the UN Security Council. Nigeria reaffirmed support for Palestinian independence and emphasized the need for sustained multilateral efforts to address global challenges.
Billions of dollars are being committed to the prosecution of wars and the planning of the embers of conflict. Yet, we always recoil from bringing out the resources we need to build peace and to deliver life's necessities to people. The question of governance is at the heart of our problems and also the solution to them. We recognize this in Nigeria when on 12th June this year, we celebrated a quarter of a century of unbroken democratic rule. We are no less proud of this achievement than the fact that during the last 2 decades, a sustained process of democratization has swept over Africa. However, the return of unconstitutional changes of government and forceful military takeovers in some countries of the Sahel underscore the fragility of democracy when it is not backed by economic development and sustained peace and security. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, climate change is a driver of insecurity, which also poses a veritable challenge to sustainable development. A few weeks ago, large areas of my country were inundated by seasonal flood waters, including one of our largest cities, Maiduguri in the northeast. Other parts of Nigeria also experienced similar tragedies, occasioning the loss of lives and property. We need not remind ourselves to remain faithful to the implementation of the commitments that we all gave voluntarily at the various COP meetings. Failure to do so is merely to postpone the inevitable. No country is immune from the effects of climate change. It is better that we cooperate and collaborate to meet this ever-increasing challenge rather than remaining in our shells, waiting for the inevitable to happen. A common challenge requires a common solution. Nigeria stands ready to meet our obligations in terms of mitigation and adaptation measures nationally and regionally, with the active participation of other countries and international partners. Mr. President, reform of the Security Council is critical if the UN is to strengthen its relevance and credibility in our rapidly changing world. Some permanent members of the United Nations Security Council have offered encouraging, if tentative, indications of support on the issue of reform of the Council. We welcome the change in tone and urge an acceleration in momentum to the process. The Security Council should be expanded in the permanent and non-permanent member categories to reflect the diversity and plurality of the world. We fully support the efforts of the Secretary General Guterres in this regard. Africa must be accorded the respect that it deserves in the Security Council. Our continent deserves a place in the permanent members category of the Security Council with the same rights and responsibilities as other permanent members.
You know, very, very unusual. This is a very special United Nations General Assembly with focus on SDGs, and SDGs are the focal point. Africa is mostly in the focus. Nigeria and Niger State, where I'm coming from, we also need to be in perspective, especially as it affects climate change, food security, security of life and properties of people, and other very important factors. So this is a very important representation, and we are glad to be here.
Sometimes a lot of these discussions just don't trickle down back home. I followed the delegation across the world over the past 12 months, and I can see the hard work that's been put in. It just doesn't trickle down. Can you talk to me about some of the tangible discussions you've had? Yeah,
you know, let me first beam on the climate change. A lot of resources, over $8 trillion is there in the carbon market, in the, you know, climate change. Africa is not in perspective, you know, and so we are basically doing a conservation instead, you know, so there's need for Africa, you know, to be given opportunity to, you know, tap from these resources that are available, because the emission is not from Africa mostly. These emissions are from the West and Americas. So we should be the people to balance the ecosystem for their emissions, you know, instead of the other way around. Again, on the issues of the effects of climate change, you can see the amount of flooding happening in Africa. You can see the planting season that has, you know, changed, you know, completely. Not for our fault, you know, fault of ours mostly, for the fault of these great people, the great countries around the world. So the conversation around helping Africa, it shouldn't be like that. You know, it should be Africa putting their demand on the table to say, okay, this is what we stand, you know, to protect. If not, yeah, we'll bring down all our trees, you know, so that we see if conservation doesn't really work, you know. So that it's good for people to understand that the sequestration of forests that we're doing, you know, we should get something for that equivalent, you know. Then transition from fossil fuel to cleaner energy, renewable energy. This is very important for us too. And in the last COP28 in Dubai, you know, those issues have been discussed. In the last UNGA, we've discussed these issues. And in perspective, we've seen significant, you know, amount of resources deployed, you know, for all this initiative. So this is good.
Being in charge of women and children in my country, Nigeria, Africa, that makes me in charge of over 70% of Nigerian population. There's nothing you can discuss without women and children. Everything concerning United Nations is all about women and children, security, peace, and so on and so forth. Even in the security and peace, you still must have to bring in women and children. So I'm here to stand firmly in what I am pursuing in Nigeria to change the narratives. Because before now, the focus was more on advocacies, policies, policy making, consultancies, and too much talk. I'm here because as I speak to you, I have changed the narrative in Nigeria, where I have changed the action plan with UNICEF, UN Women, and more are yet to come. And if I don't change those narratives with any of them, I think I will make things very difficult for them to work in Nigeria, because they have done the same thing over and over again, and we keep getting poorer and poorer. More people are dying every day out of poverty. So everybody should know that if you keep doing something and it's not working, you change your plans. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I want the UN people to understand it, and I'll make arrangements to see the UN secretary to the UN overall and explain to him that it's time for Africa to grow. Thank you.
Elsewhere, the GEAPP Leadership Council, which gathers high-level government officials from across Africa, met at the Rockefeller Center to accelerate affordable and clean energy access for over 300 million people, a vision that could dramatically reshape economies like Nigeria's and open the doors for new investments in renewable energy.
Well, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, may I say so, I really, coming here to New York, I'm being asked by journalists about the UN week. And to me, I'm saying, well, I'm starting with a GEAP week. And I really appreciate that this GEAP Leadership Council is coming together. It is a new kid on the block, I would say. We have been meeting online, our deputies have been meeting. And I think we are about to do something which is very special. I think we are innovating in the way we are addressing some of the world's most pressing challenges. With something which is measurable outcomes that people really matters to people's lives. And for us on the Leadership Council, we may say at a great distance from that light bulb which may bring electricity and hope to people, our vision is to be close to that moment, that we really make that difference in the way we combine technology, money, and the expertise and skill to make things happen. This is the third in-person meeting of the GEAP Leadership Council. I'm very encouraged by the turnout, right? That we have really people coming here. I appreciate more than ever you being here. At COP, almost a year ago, we agreed that we should really play our role in the transition from fossil fuels to the acceleration in renewable energy. Again, easy to say, but we are in that very packed room in Dubai. You could almost not breathe. I think there was a commitment that we actually could make that difference and achieve some tangible progress. That energy can be an enabler for development, not least for those who are without energy today. Secondly, that access to clean energy is absolutely fundamental to transit out of the polluting energies. You cannot ask people without any energy option to say, stop your energy, if there is not an alternative on the other side. And that we are in this together and that we have to make this transition a global effort. And I think around this table we are demonstrating that. So this is really what motivated me to say yes to join the council and to try to play our role, to trigger and encourage other governments to join, other financial contributors to join.
We had a private media roundtable and I expressed that sometimes a lot of the discussions that take place in Manhattan, it just doesn't trickle down. Talk to me about how this initiative is going to impact rural communities and when can they actually start seeing the implementation, not just the pledges and the promises?
Well, the implementation began a little while ago. If you go into Nigeria now, you'll find solar plants, distributed solar energy being installed in a number of places. In fact, I went and visited a couple of them where I could see the impact on local women not having to go and get water from a well which is 7 miles away. I could see the impact on shopkeepers who were able to keep medicine refrigerated at night. I could see the impact on people using clean cooking methods and not coal and wood. So I think the implementation has begun. What you're seeing and we are hearing is the desire to get the ambition to go beyond where it was to a quantum increase. And that's what we are discussing here, how to get the money, the partnerships. Right now, we're in the midst of creating energy compacts, which is a pathway for a country with 15 different countries to be announced in Tanzania at the end of January. That's a little far from Manhattan. And so that's the objective, get onto the African continent and talk about it there.
Coming up here on Channels Business Global, Africa Missions Global unveiled its ambitious Horizon 2033 initiative, which aims to empower 100 million lives through education by 2033. We will be sharing highlights from their roundtable discussion and we'll be sharing Juliana's exclusive interviews from the Concordia 2024 summit in New York City, where global leaders, innovators and policymakers discussed the theme, Navigating a New Era. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channels Business Global with me, Simon Pusey, from our studios here in London. As you can see, my colleague Juliana Olayinka is not here with us this week, as she has been busy gathering the business news on the sidelines of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. On Tuesday morning, Africa Missions Global unveiled its ambitious Horizon 2023 initiative, which aims to empower 100 million lives through education by 2033. The roundtable event highlighted AMG's strategic vision to align with both the African Union's Agenda 2063 and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly focusing on inclusive and quality education.
This morning, we're here to just express what we are doing concerning Africa Missions Global initiative that has to do with education. Number one, part of the Horizon 33 initiative was to ensure that education is a major priority for us. And right here today, we're here to present what we are planning to do in the next 9 years to ensure that 100 million children are educated in Africa.
The meeting is so important to bring awareness to the makers and the shifters and the people in the society of the importance of the Horizon 2033. It's an initiative for our mother in the Lord and to bring it to New York. You know, New York is where things happen. You want to be known globally, come to New York. So we are coming to New York not only to just make sure that this vision is in Africa, that the people who initiated it in Africa and the people are initiating it and making it to be in Africa. We want to make sure that this conference is global. And the best place to make it global, to make it known to the world, is none other place than New York.
If today is a success, what does success look like for this event?
Success for this event will mean that our Swaziland virtual learning program actually starts in the Kingdom of Eswatini. Success will mean that our Ladies in Tech Africa program later, that at least 76,000 girls will receive tech education. They've already started, 50,000 have enrolled. That would be success for us. Success would mean that our Vista Africa tech program, primarily targeted at African youths, that 10 years from now, well, not 10 years, 2033, 10 million of them would have received tech education, creativity, innovation, such that they can go out there and make an impact to the rest of the world. That would be success from today, because these are the three things we want to showcase to the rest of the world.
At the Concordia 2024 summit in New York City, global leaders, innovators and policymakers have come together to tackle the theme Navigating a New Era. Over the 3-day event, critical discussions focused on geopolitical shifts, climate change, artificial intelligence and economic stability.
We're in Manhattan. The great pilgrimage has begun. World leaders are here, CEOs, journalists, lots of different people from across the world. Talk to me about why you are in New York this week.
I'm here because major events are taking place globally, where we see global conflict, socio-demographic changes, but as well tremendous innovation that we want to see how it will impact our lives, and we want it to be for good. And in movement health, we are sure that great examples that are taking place in Africa, in places like Ghana, South Africa, or Algeria, can extend health span so that it may become the new lifespan. We want to live longer, yes, but we want to live healthier as well. We have been working with the National Pharmaceutical Council in Ghana in order to understand how, if you arrive to a pharmacy and you have a heart condition, how you can get in the faster way the treatment that you need. Ghana has an impressive way of connecting the pharmacies with the hospitals, and they already did great success and strides in making sure that whenever you need a specific medicine, you can know exactly in which pharmacy you can get it, which is something that not even Singapore as of now is having it. So based on that capacity, we started understanding what else could be done in order to continue improving care for people based on what was already done. And the first step is with heart conditions, but we are thrilled to extend this as well to diabetes and as well to knowing earlier if you have a condition that can be treated in the cancer space. And it has been exciting what has been going on, because there are other countries like Nigeria that as well have been listening and hearing what's going on in Ghana. And now we are in conversations to see great experiences that can have global impact, born and thought with African experience.
I had a really engaging discussion with you behind the scenes, talking about Africa. You mentioned the fact that we can't be dictated to no more, although it still kind of feels like we are. Talk to me about what's happening in Manhattan this week, why you are at Concordia today, and what success would look like for Africa at the end of this week.
Wow, that is a tall order. I will say that what drew me to Climate Week this year, as opposed to years before, is I think we're at a critical point in our development where we need to decide where the growth pools should be. As much as we work with development aid agencies, banks, and DFIs from the West, and they provide a lot of the capital, I think they've done a better job understanding what's happening on the ground. But if governments cannot also decide for their people what their strengths are, what are the resources in the country that need to be developed, and actually think of value chains. Oftentimes we see interventions, whether it's CSR or it's charitable or philanthropic, here solving this one problem, whether it's sanitary napkins or it is loans to women. What are the metrics that we're measuring to say, why aren't those sanitary napkins now being produced in Africa with sustainable materials in Africa? And how do we make sure we scale that? How do we also make sure that we're scaling the opportunity for people to work more cooperatively together and not just a random shop here and a random shop here and a random shop this? So I think, right now we're calling this a funding winter. We're seeing across VC and PE, funds are harder to raise, exits are harder to come by. I think it's a matter of markets as well. I think in Africa, we've seen the advent of venture capital in the last 15 years, and we see general partners raising money. We don't necessarily see the resulting track record for exits because we need to start talking about consolidation. Is there an opportunity to roll up companies, to vertically or horizontally integrate them, opportunistic mergers and acquisitions, and even in some cases, distress buying? Is there IP or is there a product that is worthwhile, but maybe the business model or the way the company is structured isn't the way it is? So I think we need to kind of think outside of traditional models. We tend to raise money based off of a Western model, 10-year fund with an additional 2 years. We do 2% management fee, 20% carry. Why aren't we being bold enough to push and say we need longer lead times in Africa for innovation to take hold, for companies to grow organically and maybe even inorganically? And I think so if we don't in 2024 now say we're almost a quarter into this century, say that coming to meetings like this, we now are creating, whether it's the market rules, the regulation, or the policy that actually allows for these markets to grow. When are we going to make that decision? And I think that we're starting to see in the likes of Nigeria, they have their own sovereign wealth fund. There's work by a gentleman named Solomon Quaynor at the African Development Bank trying to develop and get pension funds and sovereign wealth funds to invest in their own countries and their own regions. I think when we're able to do that in concert with money that's coming from abroad and also developing talent locally and having boots on the ground and making sure the interventions are dynamic and getting feedback from the market, I think that's when we start to shift things.
One of the challenges that we face is a lot of the development organizations, look at recruiting people, but oftentimes they are recruiting entry-level people who really don't have that much knowledge or expertise in development. So getting somebody who's already spent a whole year in a community that's not their own working on development is something that's going to help us a lot in terms of just owning this development agenda that we seek to do. Why are we at Manhattan this week is partly because everybody's here and we think a lot of the decisions are being made, a lot of the global policy conversations are happening at this point, and this is really the right place for us to make our voice heard and say, look, we have examples of what we've seen is working there, and that's what we really need to do.
Well, sadly, that's all we've got time for today, but as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. My colleague Juliana Olayenka and I will see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global.